Mhm. Hi, everyone. Hi, everyone. Welcome. I'm Anna. I'm Anna Gandrabura, and today I would like to share with you on cross-cultural communication in English. Um, yeah, so I'm pretty sure you're all joining. So just a few words about me and who I am and what I do before we get started. Like I said, my name is Anna Gandrabura. I'm teaching English. I have been teaching English for over 10 years, but also I have been running my own language school, and with some transformations along the way. The language school that I am operating now is called English for IT. So we teach English to IT professionals around the globe, actually. Of course, we started in Ukraine, but now, because there are no borders, we can deliver our services outside Ukraine. So more about me, how I came to actually teach in English, and why I am here today teaching you guys on cross-cultural communication is, of course, experience, right? So I have been working with major tech companies for the past, I would say, 8 years. Yeah. So I have been working with major companies here in Ukraine and also in the United States. And I have worked as a project manager myself for an American consultancy. That was great time for me. It was 4 years ago where I actually was able to experience this. Cross-cultural communication inside the team myself. And after that, I have been like developing different courses and different master classes and workshops to share what I learned about dealing with a multicultural team, and especially dealing with Americans. Because actually, when we talk about working with like working in tech, a lot of communication is done with Americans, right? Because a lot of business comes from the United States. So we have to communicate with the American customers, with the American, I don't know, C-level executives and other colleagues. Of course, there is a other part of the world, but the key thing with cross-cultural communication is that we have to consider the culture of the language that we use for communication. So if we use English for communicating at the workplace, it means that we have no other choice but to switch to American culture of communication. Of course, if you're communicating with British, don't get me wrong. I mean, yes, I do speak American English, and I do believe that American English is more useful for people who work in tech because more business is done in the United States. However, if you have to work with the British, you do have to follow their culture of communication, the way they communicate. But overall, even if you communicate in English with other nationalities, I would say that still people tend to stick to English speaking culture of communication. So this is what I do personally. This is what I teach, and this is what my school teaches, English for IT. And yeah, so this is us. If you guys want to check us out, but also make sure you become friends with me, because I'm also sharing a lot of useful content on my social media, Facebook and Instagram, and blog as well. So, like I said, language reflects the communication style of the cultures that use this language, right? So, like I said, because I'm Ukrainian, but I speak English, I have to follow English speaking way of communicating, right? If, let's say, a Ukrainian, like if somebody speaks Ukrainian, they will have to follow Ukrainian manner of communication. For example, if I end up speaking German at a meeting, yeah, I will have to follow German way of communication. So basically, this is why English is so important, because we when we learn a language, we also learn culture. And then because the language is universal in the world, it's easier for us to communicate. But we all have to know what are the key things of communication. So when you are a part of the big team, it doesn't have to be big team. For example, I wasn't a part of a big team. However, it was multicultural. Yeah, we had Russians, we had Ukrainians, we had Americans, we had Indians. And we did have some failures in communication because we were all speaking English. However, not everyone, we were not all the time we were on the same page, because some people did not consider the importance of understanding the way people communicate. So for example, like, what makes a good communicator? When you communicate in English, or like when you communicate in any language, it doesn't matter. There are certain things that will make you a good communicator. And here I would like to share the Confucius saying. You probably know the saying, but you may not. I personally didn't know that it was said by Confucius, but anyway, you have 2 eyes, 2 ears, 1 mouth, and you should use them accordingly, right? So if you want to be a good communicator, you have to be able to observe. Yeah, you have to be able to hear what's happening, and only then you open your mouth to say something. It's regardless what language you speak, actually. But I think that this saying is very important, especially if you speak a foreign language and if you have to communicate with people from other countries and other cultures. Because if you learn how to observe, how to observe the surrounding, how to observe the partner, the person you're speaking with, you will be able to see what kind of style of communication they have, what they say, how they answer, how they react, what kind of feelings they have, etc., etc. So that is why it's very important to observe. And especially it's important if you end up in a situation where you don't know people, or you don't know a lot about people you have to communicate with. So please remember to observe, to listen carefully, and only after speak. And when I say observe how people speak and what they say exactly. And then you can basically pick up on their communication style. Let me give you an example. Let's say like, we all know the expression "how are you," right? That is used by English speakers all the time. Let's say if you haven't been to an English speaking country, to the United States, for example, you don't know that "how are you" is not actually a conversation. It's like Americans would not build a conversation on "how are you." How are you? It's like an extension of hello. And it doesn't really require you to give details of how you feel or how your day is, right? However, if you don't know about this, you will end up giving details. However, if you first observe what other people say, like how they respond to the question, you would know what you have to say. So that's what is really important. Another thing, when you want to be, if you want to be a good communicator, another thing that you have to consider is clarification and repetition. It's also very important, especially if you communicate with multicultural group of people, and especially if you know that their language skills are not the best. So that is why here, tell them what you're going to tell them, then tell them what you've told them. So, which means, I know it kind of looks like pun, but what it really means is that you you have to use many words if you want people from other cultures understand what you're trying to say. You shouldn't be scarce on words. When I say scarce, I mean short, right? Don't think about using like short phrases, and don't expect people to understand you, right? So be very elaborate, be like, explain a lot, so you can tell people what you're going to tell them, and then you can repeat yourself, clarifying whether they understood what you said, or they need more information. That is why The biggest mistake that a lot of, I would say, even managers make when communicating with their team, or not even managers, it doesn't matter what your job is, but let's say like you have to talk to a client, right? You may be a graphic designer, you may be a senior developer, and you need to clarify some information, and you believe that they can read your mind. This is the actually mistake that even people from the same culture have. Yeah, we cannot read each other's minds. That is why we need to use words. And if we speak with somebody from another culture, we need to use a lot of words that in order so that they can understand us. So that is why keep that in mind when you communicate cross-culturally. Make sure you explain yourself in details. Don't be okay. Make sure you clarify. Make sure you paraphrase, you rephrase what you have said, and make sure like you make sure you ask like you ask your team or people you speak with if they understood. For example, when I frequently travel to the United States for educational purposes, and all the courses that I have taken, actually I was lucky this year to I came back from the States in February, and in February I took several workshops at Stanford University, and when I like all these three different workshops were taught by different speakers, but they all had one common pattern of communicating with students. And believe it or not, this is not only pattern for classroom communication. This is how generally like people communicate in some formal setting, in business setting. So every time when the speaker in our class was giving us some, I don't know, maybe some challenge information or some new information, or maybe extensive piece of information, they were always seeking our understanding. So they would be always asking, was that clear? Did I make myself clear here? Do you have any questions? So like after each part of some important piece of information, they would be asking us if we understood everything, whether we had any questions, and so on. So this is very typical American way to communicate, yeah, to make sure people are on the same page with you, make sure people are following you. And you, like for work, I think it's very important, because if you have a meeting and you want to make sure everybody is on the same page, seek understanding, like ask them if they understood everything. Another very important thing about cross-cultural communication that I wanted to share, that I personally picked up in this book, and I highly recommend you guys right away to get the book. It's I recommend this book for two reasons. So that, like, for example, typically when I teach a class or any of the courses that we offer at English for IT, there is always a double value there. So this English practice, and second is soft skills practice. So this is basically what I'm giving you now. So reading books that I recommend, there's always a double value. It's like you practice a skill. Like here, you will learn a lot about cross-cultural communication from this book, but moreover, you will also practice English. This book is very easy to read. English is very easy and up to date with a lot of good idioms and expressions here. And I would recommend you getting Kindle so that you can highlight important phrases and you can look up the translations. And this book is not like 500 pages, so you can do it. Basically, I would say that I could recommend this book for somebody with a strong intermediate level and higher, so that would be good. So in this book, the author was sharing an interesting insight on cultures and communication cultures. So this is an illustration from the book. So I didn't do it myself, you guys, yeah. So I'm just sharing with you. This is how we can divide the world depending on how they communicate. So we can consider two parts, like two, I don't know, high context culture of communication and low context culture of communication. And you know what? As soon as I saw this, it made things so much easier, because now basically you can look at this illustration, and you can basically analyze people you work with, what kind of patterns they follow in communication. If they are people from low context culture, this is the United States. You can see the United States are the lowest context culture in the world. It means that for people from low context culture, communication should be precise, very simple and clear. I can totally agree with this, because when you communicate with Americans, Americans like to be very clear and very simple in the way they speak. That is why I always say that English is a very, very simple language compared to, for example, Russian, or Ukrainian. When we talk about business Ukrainian or business Russian, it's very complicated. When we speak about business English, it's not that complicated. However, it may be nuanced. I will talk about those nuances a little bit later, so stay tuned. Don't leave, stay for more. Yeah, so for low context, like I said, messages should be expressed directly. They say at a face value. It means that I can directly tell you how I feel, what I like, for example. I'm very open about my feelings. So this is low context culture. And repetition is very appreciated. This is what I said from the previous slide. You tell them what you're going to tell them and repeat what you have just told them, right? So repetition is appreciated. When we talk about high context culture, communication is the opposite, right? So communication is very sophisticated. It's nuanced. This is usually messages in high context culture are the messages where you need to read between lines. Yeah, read between the lines. They are using metaphors, and also body language here plays an important role as well. And messages are not plainly expressed. They are more, like I said, sophisticated. And then again, if you look at this map, you can see that with the US, with Americans, we have to communicate in a simple way and very clear. Australians, similar. Canadians, similar. So basically, English-speaking culture of communication is low context. We can see that UK is a little bit different. It's kind of drifting towards the middle between low context and high context, but then again, it's still quite direct and open. And then we can see that most of Asian countries are Middle East are high context. And actually, I don't know if you guys if you can participate here with me, but my question usually is, why do you think the world has been divided in this particular way? Why most Middle Eastern and Asian countries are high context, and why European countries, and we can see here Northern Europe and English-speaking countries, why are those countries low context? I don't know. I can hold on here for a minute, and if you guys can answer in chat why you think the world has been divided in this particular way, that would be fantastic. I would like to hear from you. Okay, I can see already a few first answers. The language reflects culture as well. This is true, but why? So what's up with the culture there? What kind of culture does the language reflect here? It's actually interesting. Because it makes it easier for you to remember for the future. If you don't see this illustration, you will still remember that, I don't know, Malaysians, for example, are high context in the way they communicate, while, I don't know, the Dutch are low context in the way they communicate. All right. Well, this is the history basically. This is reflect of the history of the country. So we can see that high context cultures are the cultures with the longest history of the country. So like here's an example. Imagine that you have been married for 20 years with your husband and wife, and imagine you have been married for 2 years. What is the difference? If I have been married with someone for 20 years, I know this person so well that I don't need to use words to tell him what I want, for example, or to show my feelings. Right? It is understandable from my body language, from other patterns. And imagine if I have been married for 2 years, I will need to communicate to my husband what I really want, because he cannot guess. We haven't known each other for that long to take this wild guess. This is actually a good example of communication as a married couple, right? So if you're a newly married couple, make sure you use a lot of words and make sure you use low context way of communication. You are very clear, very specific. You use repetition, right? So because to ensure good communication. And if you have been married for long enough, you don't need that. So the same here. Countries like Asian countries have really, really long history, right? That is why people, and it's usually like one culture there, right? It's not populated with different cultures, and people can understand each other very well because they have been living with each other for long enough. And why the United States is the country with low context culture, right? Because United States, it's a country where there is a melting pot, they say, right? There's a melting pot of different cultures, nationalities. How can they possibly understand each other if they don't express their mind directly and clearly? That's important. That is why when you communicate with people from other cultures, regardless what your country is, like regardless whether you are high context or low context, if you communicate with people from other cultures, you need to communicate in low context manner. Okay, so that's very important. For example, if we talk about Ukrainians, I would say that Ukrainians would probably be somewhere in the middle, right? But if we communicate with the people from China, we don't need to be high context. And also Chinese, when they communicate with the Americans, they have to try to be low context, right? But this is very this is like it needs some getting used to, and it needs some getting to know too as well. I mean, if we all know about these patterns, we would change our styles of communication depending who we're speaking with. So now, if you, let's say, if you work for an international team, international company, and your team consists of like 5 different nationalities, your language has to be low context. Even if part of them are high context and another part are low context, you have to make a mutual agreement and communicate in low context manner. How can you do this? As a manager, for example, if you are a manager, you can educate your team, you can tell your team about cross-cultural differences, and you can agree that you need to communicate in low context manner. And you, of course, you need to explain what low context means. It means a very precise, very simple, very, very clear communication. And then when you agree on this, believe me, you won't have any issues with communication. However, every member on the team should know about this. Let's say you're not a manager, but you are here right now and you are listening to this valuable information. What should you do? You can share this information with your team. Share this information with your manager, with your CEO, I don't know, and just with your teammates who are from different cultures. You can even, I don't know, have a meeting where you talk about this, or you can invite me for this meeting, of course. And then you have to agree that you need to you shouldn't be like secretive about things, because actually people from high context culture, they may come across as very secretive people because they don't tell you directly what they think, and you as a person from, like, let's say low context culture, you may think that they're hiding something, right? Or they are not honest about something. But no, this is only because this is their way of communication, this is how they communicate. That is why as a multicultural team, you have to be low context in communication. So when we think about, again, communicating cross culturally, I would like to highlight 5 things that are particularly important in order to avoid some miscommunications and problems, right? This is, first, we have discussed the communication pattern, low context or high context, right? You have to understand where people, or where the person you have to talk to come from, where they come from, and how they typically communicate. So you need to agree on certain level of communication, certain pattern of communication. So like I said, that if you come from low context culture, it means that you will be very open in the way you communicate. However, not in everything. Let's again take Americans, for example, right? Since here we are practicing English, and I would like to give more examples about American culture of communication, because I'm pretty sure it's going to be useful for you in the long run. So Americans are very open about what they say and how they say it, right? However, they are not really open about the way they give negative feedback and the way they give bad news or the way they give rejections. So let's say my friend's mother told me that she loves me like 2 hours after we met. But like what it really means, like to me as a Ukrainian, it was a little bit, it was a little bit too much, I would say. However, she's an American, right? She's an American and she really liked me. And in American language, I love you, like when you say it to a friend, for example, it means I like you. It doesn't mean like she loves me, like she likes me, right? I mean, she doesn't love me as her daughter, for example, right? However, if, for example, if she had to tell me something negative, for example, if she had to tell me some, I don't know, that I did something wrong, she would never say this, So when giving feedback, when giving negative feedback, Americans are very careful. That is why oftentimes, by the way, oftentimes it's like a buzzword that I heard in the United States this winter. They use it all the time instead of very often. You can say oftentimes at the beginning of the sentence to sound like a native speaker. So oftentimes we don't understand when Americans or British or English speakers give us negative feedback, or tells us negative news, or give us say no. We just don't understand, because when I hear a phrase, I'm not sure it's a good example. For example, let me put it this way. You tell me, Anna, I'm not sure it's a good example. This is negative feedback. You tell me that my example is bad. So in other words, when you say, I'm not sure it's a good example, it means, Anna, this example is bad or irrelevant. However, if you don't know, as a Ukrainian or Russian speaking, or I don't know, Polish speaking person, you don't know that this is the way English speakers express their dissatisfaction or disagreement, you would never guess. And trust me, as you know, I teach English in tech companies, and teach these master classes on communication and cross-cultural differences. And at one of the workshops, my students told me a story that one girl was fired because client told her, I don't think this is a good idea for the project. And she didn't understand that he wasn't happy. She thought that he wasn't sure. because he said, I don't think so, or I'm not sure. I'm not sure it's a good solution, for example. She didn't understand that he meant it's a bad solution and we need another solution. So she didn't react to this message. And basically the client didn't want to work with the company or something like that, or she was fired, something like that. So that is why, even though English speaking cultures are low context, however, not when it concerns negative feedback, giving bad news, and saying no. I will give you more examples of what, like more examples of what the English phrase is and what it really means in American English. Yeah, so let me cover the rest of the topics, and then we will move to a more practical part of it. Yeah, so by the way, guys, if you have any questions or you want to make any comments, feel free to comment here under the video. I will answer your questions at the end, when we are coming to the end of the webinar, or if you have any other questions, I mean, if you have more questions, I will answer them after, in response to your message. So feedback is very important. So like when, and also culture-wise, when we talk about cultures, feedback can be expressed in a different way in different cultures. For example, Dutch people who live in the Netherlands, they really like direct feedback. Americans like indirect feedback. I mean, it's not like they like it, it's the pattern that they use. For example, if I give feedback to a Dutch colleague and I try to sugarcoat it, that's a good expression for you too. Sugarcoat, it means to make it look better than it actually is. If I try to sugarcoat it, they won't understand it. They won't understand it because they will think that I'm unprofessional. I have to say directly what I think. The same, for example, in Ukraine, right? I don't have a problem if people tell me what was wrong, but of course they have to be polite and like they don't have to shout and criticize. But like if they tell me, Anna, you should speak slower, yeah, can you speak slower? Like it's not a problem for me. However, for an American, it can be more like you may need to use other phrases here. But like I said, in the Netherlands, very direct, they have no problem with this. So you also have to consider how people are accepting this feedback, and you should try to follow their manner, yeah, their pattern. However, I would also recommend you guys learn how to give feedback no matter what the culture is like. I mean, sometimes it is crucial, yeah. Sometimes it is crucial to know the cultural differences. Because, for example, if you are going to be very direct with your negative feedback with an American, let's say, or British, it's going to be a fiasco here, basically, because they will not, they won't understand you. Yeah, they won't understand your message. That is why knowing the culture is important, but also it's very important to develop a skill of giving and receiving feedback. And my personal recommendation, actually, I have a podcast on how to give and receive feedback in my Telegram channel. So you feel free to join and listen to it, or just find me in social media. I will share it with you. I was talking about how to properly give and receive feedback. And here, no matter what your culture is, if you learn how to do it like universally, people will understand you and won't be upset with you and will accept your feedback in a proper way. However, this is a skill that you need to develop, and also you need to teach other people. Like if we're talking about work, yeah, team, you have to teach, educate your team as well. Leadership is also an important thing, a skill to consider when we talk about cross-cultural communication, is because it's because different cultures interpret a leadership in a different way. You know, there is a flat leadership pattern and there is hierarchical, right? So depending on which culture you communicate with, you have to consider how to communicate with C-levels, right? With top management. Is it a hierarchical structure or flat? So you need to be here pretty careful and learn about this before an important communication event. Agreement and disagreement. This is another important thing. In some cultures, they like to be very consensual, come to consensus, but others like to argue and disagree. However, it doesn't mean that they want to have a fight with you. As far as I know, like Arabic countries, they like to disagree with each other, maybe, and but this is a part of the culture. It doesn't mean that like you have to be prepared that they may disagree with you, but this is because of the culture, not because they don't like you or something like that. So this is an important thing to consider. And schedule is important too when we talk about work. Why I included this here, because we are discussing cross-cultural communication at the workplace. Being late or coming early, what is the key thing here? Like, let's say Indians, if you have ever worked with Indians, schedule being on time is not an important thing there. People are always late and they don't consider this. However, for example, if you deal with the Germans or Scandinavian countries, I would say that schedule being on time is pretty important there. And if you don't do it, if you're not on time, you may come across as unprofessional person. So that is why consider these things when you need to communicate cross-culturally, and especially when this is your first time encounter communicating cross-culturally. Once again, guys, the book, The Culture Map, that I have recommended, and now I would like to share more on what certain phrases in English say and what they actually mean. For example, when you want to say that's interesting, I mean, when you hear from an American that's interesting, it usually means I don't like it or it's boring. Believe it or not, but that's true. And especially if you follow the intonation, if the intonation is oh, that's interesting, it means like, that's not interesting, I don't want to talk about this. So other phrases that you can hear that may mean an opposite thing, actually. For example, I know oftentimes when you try to tell a story, you say, my friend told me this, right? Or my friend, and then you stop yourself as a non-native English speaker. You stop yourself and you say, oh no, he's not my friend, it's just a person I know. Well, guess what? In American English, when you say my friend, you don't actually mean my friend, you mean a person I know. And when you say my best friend, it doesn't actually mean like it doesn't have to be your very best friend. It may be just a person who you actually like spending time together. So you see, like, you typically, that's why it's hard for nobody knows the word знакомый in English, because English speakers don't use the word знакомый as much as we use it. Because, like, if we speak, let's say, in Russian or Ukrainian, we use the word знакомый or знакомый all the time. However, not in English. So just say friend. Another thing. Now it's going to be eye-opener for you. So you probably know about how are you. I already mentioned at the beginning that how are you is just an extension of hello, and you don't really need to get into details saying like I'm good, I have a backache today, the weather is horrible, and things like that. So what you typically say when I ask you how are you, you say I'm doing great. And you know what? When I hear my students, or just, when I hear my students say, I'm okay, I say, no, you don't say I'm okay, because I'm okay means I'm not good. I'm not well. Yeah. And the same when you say I'm fine actually means I'm not fine. That is why if you don't want people to ask you what happened, right? Because they are going to actually ask you a question like if If I ask you, how are you? And you say, I'm okay, I'm going to say, oh, what happened? So if you don't want to give details of what happened, if nothing actually happened, unless you really want to share those details, um, just say, I'm great. Because when I say I'm great, it doesn't mean you're fantastic. It just means you're good. Okay. So I'm great. It's the phrase that you want to use. How are you? Because when you say I'm fine or I'm okay, it doesn't actually mean that you're good. Yeah, so those are the language, the cultural things that may make the process of communication difficult for you. Then again, like I said, when you say it's great, it doesn't mean that you're fantastic. It just means that you're good. Everything's good. The same with when you hear phrases like "it's amazing," for example. It's amazing. It means it's pretty good. There is nothing extraordinary, but it just, I think because Americans are really, American culture and like English speaking culture is really focused on positive things, right? They are focusing on positive thinking. I think they are using those exaggerations to make things look better than they are. However, this is about positive things. And like I said, with the negative things, they are trying to also make them look less negative. However, for us as non-native English speakers, we have to understand and we have to see what they really mean when they say, when they say it's we have a problem, it means things are very bad. If things are not very bad, don't say we have a problem. Say there is an issue. For example, we have an issue with this, right? So use issue instead, because really in English, problem means something bad that there is no way out here. And if you want to say, for example, yeah, when you want to say no, yeah, let's say when you say, I'm like, when you invite somebody to have coffee, right? Or you just met somebody for the first time, and you hear, that's a good example. You just met somebody for the first time, and when you say goodbye, they say, hey, let's get coffee sometime. It just means goodbye. It doesn't mean, it may mean that yes, you want to have coffee, but it doesn't have to be like, as a person from a different culture, you shouldn't consider this like, let's have coffee sometime. You shouldn't consider this as an invitation, as a direct invitation. It may be an invitation, however, it usually means just goodbye, see you later. The same when people tell you, let's hang out sometime. Yeah, let's hang out sometime. The same, goodbye. Maybe I will see you, but maybe I will never see you again. Yeah. So, and when Americans actually say, let's get dinner sometime, this means, this actually means that I want to see you. Like, you are my friend and I want to see you again. Because for American culture, dinner is very important. There is even, I think, one of the presidents in the US said that great things happen at dinner table, like great deals or something. I don't remember exact wording of this phrase, but like a dinner in American culture is very important. This is a family time. And that is why when you hear, let's get dinner sometimes, it like, the person really wants to see you. But like, let's have coffee or let's hang out, it may mean really nothing, just goodbye. Yeah, so that's how you have to think about those expressions and how you consider them. Oh yeah, there's a slide, you guys can see it, what when Americans say and what they really mean, right? So you see awesome, fabulous, amazing, this is just good, great, fine, fine, okay, bad, not so great, it's really bad. So you see how you communicate negative things. You don't say really bad, you say not so great, for example. And yeah, hilarious, unexpected, for sure, probably, forever, 30 minutes. Yeah, I've been waiting. This is when you say, I've been waiting for you forever. It's like, it's just 30 minutes here. Yeah, so consider those when communicating in English with the native speakers. Of course, if you communicate in English with speakers of other languages, you won't have this problem. Yeah, because this is why oftentimes people tell me, Anna, I understand my Polish colleague better than American. Yeah, because Polish colleague is speaking the same language as you do. So they are not using those cultural things, right? Yes, you may be speaking really good, like really good English with a lot of idioms. Yeah, that's great. This is another thing, right? Native speakers use a lot of idioms that also come from culture, and to be able to learn to know them and use them appropriately, you have to understand culture. But then again, even with somebody from a different culture, like if you talk to me, I'm using a lot of cultural things. For example, if I want to say no to you, I'm going to do it in American way. It already happened with me. And one of my Instagram followers, she asked me, how to translate a certain word, and of course I'm not Google to translate words for people online. So I told her I would have to check it up in Google, and that meant no, I'm not gonna say this. But she was like, oh, Anna, thank you so much, I'm looking forward to hear a response from you. But I was like, I actually meant that I'm not gonna do it. But I responded, I rejected it, I said no in a polite way, right? And like, if she was a native speaker, she would understand that I wasn't gonna do it because it caused me some effort that she can do herself, basically. And yeah, so that's kind of important here too to consider. And guys, another thing that I want to share with you is best practices for doing business in the US. That is, again, I can recommend a book where I took the information from. And actually this book is, there you go, is called Kiss, Bow, or Shake Hands. It's not a new book. It has been reissued several times, but I can tell you that this is like very popular book in the world on if you need to know how to communicate with different cultures. So this book contains all the countries in the world and how to do business, specifically business with these countries. So let's say you need to communicate, you have never dealt with Koreans, and you have to speak to a Korean business partner. You open up this book and you can read everything about Korean culture of communication and how to communicate with Koreans. For example, what can we learn about the United States? United States, you have to be punctual when it's about business. Not only about business, it's about personal life too. People don't like when you are super late, because usually it's people are waiting for you, and it's about parking spaces, looking for parking spaces, etc., etc. So like, you have to be on time. American culture is being on time. Prior appointments are very necessary. This is an important thing. Like, nobody's going to have a meeting with you if you just call. Like, even if this is your friend. So when I'm in the United States, I can never meet my friends on the same day. It's usually we have to make an appointment at least 2 days in advance, because everyone is busy and people can't find time for you when you just call them, hey, can you meet me in half an hour? Which is very typical for Ukraine, for example. Business is done in a lightning speed. Americans are very fast with everything. Competition is a rule of life. People are competing in all stages, like in all categories of their life. In business and personal life, it's all about competition. And you should consider this if you do business with Americans. If you can compete, like if you can create the same sense of competition, that would be great. Small talk to begin the meeting, of course. Small talk, it's America is the origin of small talk, basically. However, guys, you may be surprised, but Europe is big on small talk as well. Ukraine and Russia, we are not as much, but I was surprised that Poland, for example, people love small talk there and they use it a lot. Of course, probably not as much as in America, because like in America, literally strangers would talk to you, will like in the street will try talking to you. But this, again, if you speak English well, but you don't know things like small talk, you won't be able to have successful communication with your partners and with your colleagues. I mean, you can definitely achieve more if you can speak good English and you know the culture of communication in American world, in America, for example. Compliments are exchanged very often. This is another thing. Americans are really big on compliments, and compliments can be a good startup line for small talk as well. For example, as a girl, I would use compliments to start small talk with other ladies. For example, I can compliment a dress, outfit, or maybe hair or makeup. But be careful with complimenting. Like when a guy compliments a girl, make sure it's not sexual harassment. Make sure it's a decent compliment. So, like, let's say you are in the office and you're a guy and you want to compliment a girl, don't compliment her I don't know, hair, because usually hair is very personal. Don't compliment her body shape, because that may be like tricky. So you can compliment things like purse. You can compliment maybe the office. For example, you can say, Anna, you have such a nice picture behind you, right? So that's a compliment, and this is something that can help us start a conversation here. And also be prepared to accept compliment. If you're communicating with a person from an English speaking culture, be prepared that they are going to give you compliments. So you have to know how to react to those compliments, right? Don't say something stupid like, I don't know. Oh no, my picture is not nice, or no, that's a cheap picture, or something like that. So like accept the compliment and try to build conversation on top of it. So that's what you do. So then again, you can read more about this in the book. And overall, you guys, I would like to address a question that you have now, but also before we get down to that, I would like to summarize my main points of today's speech. Is when you communicate across cultures, you have to be really wordy. Explain yourself in many different ways, and also ask people questions to explain themselves so that you don't have miscommunication and misunderstanding. And of course, depending on which culture you communicate with, make sure you know something about this culture. It's very helpful. If you don't know anything, use your eyes and your ears. Observe and listen to people. This is a skill that you really need no matter what the situation is. Observe, listen to people, and then make decisions what you're going to say and how you're going to say it, right? And of course, educate yourself. This is always trendy. Reading books, attending different workshops and master classes. This really helps people to excel in their careers. Education is always trendy and helps us to communicate. Because at the end of the day, communication, like even if your hard skill is writing code, for example, trust me, communication is a soft skill that you will need to excel in your career. Because I don't think that they will ever make you a senior developer or, I don't know, CTO if you don't know how to communicate with people. Because at the end of the day, we work on a computer. However, we work with people. Yeah, we write programs, we write software, but we do communicate with people. So, and if you want to excel in your career, you have to improve your communication skills, your people skills, and of course, cross-cultural skills, communication if you work for an international company. So you guys, let me know if you have any questions, and I can address them. Yeah, I can see some of your these the British are even more complicated. Yeah, I agree. British would be more complicated because they are more high context in the way they express themselves. So they are hiding their message between the lines. So you're right. This way of expression dissatisfaction is very correct and polite, actually. Yeah, I agree with you. When you don't tell directly, like, you did it bad, right? You did something bad, you but you find better words how to express this. This is better because such feedback is easier to be accepted. Because just imagine if you are being criticized in a very harsh way, your first feeling that you have is a defense. You want to defend yourself why you did this bad. However, if the person who is criticizing you is doing it in the right way, you will hear that they are trying to help you instead of saying that you did something bad. You share the information which is not new. Well, Raisa, information is out there. I'm happy that you have that everything that I shared you already knew before that. But I'm sure that for some people this information was new and very useful. If you have any information that you would like to share with us, feel free to drop a link in the message, of course. Um, at Stanford, I attended courses, different courses on communication, actually, and communication. So, like, my courses that I took was on effective nonverbal communication, on public speaking, on how to tackle tough conversations. So various courses like that. So Stanford has a lot to offer. You can check everything on their website. They also have online programs, so feel free to join them as well. I've never taken an online program there though. However, I'm pretty sure it's going to be useful and very knowledgeable too. Um, Key communication keys about French people. Yeah, so the first thing about French people, you always need to apologize if you don't speak French. It's a cliche and it makes French people happy because, you know, French people are really, they are a bit arrogant, and they think that they are the best in the world. So, and they believe that everybody has to speak French. So if you don't speak French, you can at least start by saying, I'm sorry, I wish I could speak French. Or you can say a few words in French. It always helps as well. For example, you can say je ne parle pas français, and like something like that. So French are the people who actually like to object, who like to argue, because they like this process of like exchanging arguments. So when you communicate with French, try to express every possible objection, but don't react to every objection. Yeah, you have to learn how to play this game when you're like exchanging objections. However, you are not actually having an argument. You have to remember it's not about argument. It's just about creating this a feeling of a game. French like eloquent debates. They like extensive debates, conversation with a lot of words, emotions, etc. um, uh, French also always make appointments like Americans, but so you have to be punctual. And again, like when you communicate with French, it's all about French. So if you have a business card, make sure your business card is in French. When you communicate with French, eye contact is very important. And sometimes eye contact is very intense. So if you're a person who avoids eye contact with French, it's going to be very hard. They will look into your eyes directly and frequently too. And also, when you communicate with French, what I learned from my personal communication with French don't like personal questions. Sometimes even questions, if you are, let's say, at a party and you ask, where do you work? this question is not wanted because they believe it's a personal question, because you are not at work now. And by asking where do you work, you want to know basically what the position is and how much money the person is earning. So don't ask personal questions about salary, of course. Don't ask personal questions about family. So if this is the first encounter with this person. And also be prepared that the French, as similar to Italians, they will be very they will use a lot of gestures, and they may use a high-pitched voice. So don't mistake these for anger. They may be like emotional, but not because it's anger. It's just the way they communicate. The same as people who speak Russian, for example. My American friends tell me that when I speak Russian, it sounds like I argue with people, but actually I don't argue with people. And yes, so and the best time for the French to do business, it's daytime, not evening time. Evening time, like Americans, it's for family. So this is like quick overview about French practices, business practices, but you can find more in the book that I have shared with you guys. There is information about all cultures and all nationalities. And yeah, so thanks a lot. And we have to wrap up. I have to move to another meeting. So thank you very much for being with me. And if you have any more questions, please do reach out to me. You can find me on Facebook. Let me show my first slide here. You can find me on Facebook, on Instagram, and ask questions. I will be happy to address them. Thank you all, and have a wonderful end of your day, and hope to see you all again.